Welcome everyone to Just Onside. I'm your host Ahmed Baggio Baghdadi, and I am joined by the self-professed Arsenal fan who believes they have no chance against City tomorrow, Uwais Ahmed, and the man who, just as recent as last night, had said he was on his knees. But what he does in his private time is up to him. Ayu Patel, thank you for joining us, gents.
No, brilliant. Thank you. I was just thinking, since you stopped doing those introductions, Arsenal haven't won a game. So the fact that you've given us one today, I think bodes well for tomorrow's game. So
Bodes well,
so
bodes
so
well.
thank you for that, and
Nah,
good to have you back as well.
thank you, thank you. But yeah, I was going to say before we start, I appreciate you boys doing the holding the fort down last night and doing a lead special, which I would have thoroughly enjoyed being a part of, but alas, it wasn't to be. And it was a good episode. I thought you were going to be a bit more. Thought you were going to let him have it, but
It's just, and other people have made comments on that as well, that they expect it to be quite an explosive episode. But I've been looking at the forums as well, do you know, for Leeds, and I think most fans are like me. We're just resigned. So in a sense, once you resign to the inevitable, I don't think you're going to be as angry as vociferous as you would be, I suppose, if it was if it was the first few defeats that we had. So I'm afraid you're not going to get the clickbait that this channel may need. I'm just going to be quiet. I mean, even tonight, obviously, there's a fixture tonight. I'm sort of nervous, but in a sense, I'm almost expecting a defeat. So when we do the next one, I'm not going to be up in arms because I almost expected it. So that's the reason why.
well, there goes our viewership.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking, I did not hear a word since you went a lead special, two words that you don't expect to be in the same sentence together. But anyway, we digress. Let's
We
carry on.
digress. We digress. But yeah, boys, we are going to go straight into the team of the hour. Obviously, after Sunday night, Manchester United progress past Brighton through to the FA Cup final, where they will meet their noisy neighbours, Man City. But to get there, it was a bit of a struggle. Brighton, great showing from them. Some may have said would have deserved to have gone through, but it was an even game on the whole. But even prior to that, the last episode I was a part of, we were discussing United's next two fixtures, which were Sevilla and Brighton. I did think at the time that we would progress in both competitions. I did say that Sevilla was the one I was worried about more so, just because of their love affair with the Europa League and their know-how in the competition. No matter how bad a season they were having, they were always going to be a side you don't really want to play. So they were a concern for me, and fears were realized. But the manner in which we went out on Thursday night was absolutely appalling, in my opinion. It was just I couldn't believe what I was watching at times. I think the Bruno Fernandes's presence, I think him missing the game. I think we felt that massively. We felt that massively. There was no real leaders on that pitch, dragging us through the game. Just a distinct lack of quality. We weren't really up for the fight. And their goals, my God, David De Gea had a night to forget. And it was funny because I was bigging him up about his performances and the fact he's up for the Golden Glove. I know this is Europe, but still, horror show, absolute horror show. And I hate to say it, I ain't one of them guys that does a pile on certain players. But when Harry Maguire plays, the level of anxiety in that defense, it just goes through the roof. Unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable. I'd argue, makes Lindelof look worse because Lindelof is actually a very, very good centre back.
Who did you have at fault for that first goal against Sevilla?
I had him equally at fault. De Gea, knowing it's Maguire, shouldn't have given it him. And Maguire, he was asking for it like he's press resistant. And my goodness, awful errors on both their parts. And then De Gea on the third one. I have no words. But I think, unfortunately for David De Gea, these last two games, Sevilla and Brighton, have highlighted massively our problems with him in goal, which are not so much his shot stopping. He's an elite shot stopper, better than pretty much anyone in the game when it comes to actually shot stopping. But against Brighton, it was clear as day that the mistakes from Thursday were still in his mind. and he did not want to play any short passes. So he was clearing his lines, which I mean, a lot of our fans will, I'm sure, agree with me when I say we always say like if you can't play out from the back, or if you're nervous, or if you don't think you have the personnel, just hoof it clear. We were hoofing it clear, but that meant we were just giving possession back to Brighton each time, and they were just building their attack, building their attacks, building their attacks. It doesn't help when you don't have a press from the front either, from Martial, Rashford, etc. But I think it proved that United do need a new keeper going into the summer. The performance on Thursday, thankfully, has been erased from my memory now after a great victory against an unbelievable Brighton side, by the way. I feel for him. I feel like on any other day they deserve to be in the final. Solly March, the unfortunate player to have missed his penalty, but again, he had a fantastic game. And one of the duels I did point out, Aaron Wan-Bissaka versus Mitoma. Nobody passes this Wan-Bissaka test. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for someone to step up and pass that test, but he's having the season of his life at the moment. And Mitoma did not complete a single take on, which is incredible given the way he's been playing and how his season's been. But on the whole, I can't believe United won a penalty shootout. My wife was coming home, I think, as Adam Webster was taking his penalty, and she heard me from outside the house losing my rag because I was like, this brother is reading his bottle at where the players are going to go, and he's guessing the wrong way each time.
It's. I bet you were having those memories of the final against Villarreal.
Oh man, oh my God, it was that all over again. I was like, it's gonna get to the hay of this. But then I did say to my wife, the only way, she wasn't even interested, but the only way United were going to win this is if someone misses the target completely. And Solly March, funnily enough, I think he did the same thing in the Carabao Cup. He went for the same top corner and he missed for Brighton in that as well. So, and then the Iceman stepped up and put the game to bed. It capped off a man of the match performance from him as well. So, delighted we get to a final against City. The chances of us winning that final, I'm not gonna lie, I have it at 25% right now. Because I think City are in unbelievable form, and we'll get onto that later in the show. But yeah, that's my thoughts on United. I think it was a great way to come back after that horrendous severe loss. And it was a good way to bounce back. And I hope that continues into this Thursday when we have Spurs, who again we'll get onto because I can't wait for that. But yeah, your guys' thoughts, Lewis, if you want to go.
Yeah, you've covered some of the points that I wanted to touch on. Just before I start, you mentioned about David De Gea. There are some rumours that they are looking to negotiate a new contract on some fresh terms, which normally is English or is football speak for taking a pay cut. Do you see that happening, or do you think Manchester United will be looking to move on? I think he spent 12 years at the club.
He's been an incredible servant to the club, and honestly, he's been the player of the season like numerous times. He's saved us so many points numerous times. He's won his game single-handedly. So there's absolutely no disrespect. I love David De Gea. I think he's fantastic. I thought he's having a good season this time out as well. But there is a glaring problem with the fact that he can't play with it. And I hate that we've come to that. We've come to that point in football where your keeper has to be able to play as well. It's just a damn shame. But it is what it is. And I think the last two games have been damning for him because he's had a very good season, but those two games have highlighted exactly why a new keeper is needed, especially for the way we want to play out from the back. I think in the season he's been lucky with having someone like Lisandro Martinez, who's just fantastic. He's as good a ball player as you want. Like he doesn't take the pressure on, whereas you saw Maguire in the exact same position lose it immediately. So he's been lucky in that regard, but I think prior to Sevilla, I think there was a good chance he would sign a contract extension. I think now, I'm not so sure anymore. And I do think a keeper and a striker will be the priority going into the summer.
It's interesting to hear you say about how we've got to the point in football where goalkeepers are expected to play with their feet. It's really over the last couple of years, longer, I would say, is where your front line are expected to press in some ways as an extension of your defense to try and keep the ball as far away from your own goal. And similarly, conversely, the goalkeeper is an extension of your attack by looking to kind of spring balls and kind of beat that initial press of the opposition as well. So that is a interesting point that I think we should get to at some point in future episodes. I think you summarized it well. The Thursday game against Sevilla was always going to be a difficult one after the way the first leg ended. It's very rare to see a turnaround like the one we saw United in complete control in the first leg. Then you see some the first own goal is avoidable. The second own goal is just unlucky. But I think with the Bruno yellow card and suspension, and then the Rashford injury, he obviously missed the first leg as well. United were always going to find it difficult. It was always going to be a difficult game, and it proved to be the case. I think some huge individual errors for the first goal. Having watched it, I think you're right. David De Gea's probably not. I mean, Maguire's done the right thing. He's given him an option, right? He's given him an angle, and that's what you want your defenders to do. I think De Gea's slightly.
I don't know. I don't think he should give De Gea that option because he's not on the half turn. He's facing him. If you're facing him, you don't know what's behind you. He's not scanned. There's only one thing that's going to happen there. He's either going to go back or he's going to lose it with a blind pass, which he did. So it's unfortunate that.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, but I think you're right. I mean, I thought Maguire was a little bit more culpable, but fine, it happens at the highest level. They were pressing quite well, but as for that second goal, I mean, to get lobbed pretty much from your own line, I don't understand that in any way at all. And then as for that third goal, he reminded me of your first touch at times badge, but that was just horrendous. I'm not sure what he was doing.
How dare you?
I'm not sure what he was doing going out of his goal. I mean, he obviously tried to trap it and then caught himself in a panic similar to Nick Pope against Liverpool a few games ago at St James's Park, if you remember. But yeah, a night to forget for United. They deserved to lose. They were lucky to get 0 actually in the game, I felt. But then to turn that around after a difficult night in Sevilla to come back Sunday and play as they did against a good team. Let's be honest. There's not much in terms of the footballing style and in terms of attacking potencies. There's definitely not that much difference between the two clubs. Let's be very honest. Brighton are a difficult team, and that game could have gone either way. It was one of those unusual games where normally when you see a 0-0 at the end of 120 minutes, you think, oh, it must have been a tight game, but it felt like both teams had their periods in the game where they were fairly dominant. I would say, I mean, Brighton on the whole were probably slightly the better team, but United had decent periods in that first half where they looked quite threatening, and similarly in the second half. And I thought that save that Sanchez made from Rashford was a stunning save, truth be told, and I think that kept Brighton in it. But yeah, when it goes to penalties, it's a lottery, right? And Solly March, it's really interesting. He's such a good technician. He's a good striker of the ball. He's had a lot of goals, scored a lot of goals for Brighton this season. But penalties is something that you cannot replicate. It's the pressure. It's the intensity of the moment, and he's obviously blazed it over. I agree with you on your Aaron Wan-Bissaka assessment. I thought he had a great game. Again, probably would like to dive a little deeper into that as well. I do think, and I think most United fans, I think, would agree that a lot of his defensive prowess and abilities, which are second to none. Let's be very clear. But I think some of that is simply because it's not that he's limited going forward. It's more that he's not your modern day fullback that's kind of bombing up and down. And I do think if he was one of those fullbacks that gave you as much going forward as he did going back, that would definitely compromise his defensive capabilities.
True.
But he's a superb defender. There's no two
But in
ways about
fairness
it.
to him, he has improved his game going forward as well this season, which I don't think a lot of people saw coming as well. So
Yeah, he
fair play to him.
showed me some technical ability at times, which I didn't think he had in terms of these dribbles and take-ons and what have you. So I do agree with you. So yeah, a great opportunity for Manchester United going into a second domestic cup final against Manchester City. And obviously, if they win that, that's 2 domestic trophies with the Carabao Cup already in the bag and the FA Cup. And of course, both of you will be arguing that makes it a similar season to what Liverpool had last year because they won both domestic trophies as well. So, no, good luck to them. But I think on the whole, it was an equal game. So it could have gone either way. So I don't think you can argue too much with the result.
There's nothing more really that I can add. You've covered virtually everything. And the only thing was for me, I do have a soft spot for Brighton. And as a Leeds fan, I suppose it's what could be if you've got the right ownership, the right recruitment. So they've had a fantastic season. It would have just been nice. I think it gives hope, or it gives an example to clubs such as Leeds as to what you need to do, how you need to run a football club to have some sort of success. So it would have been nice, I suppose, if Brighton had got to the final. It would have given a great boost to clubs such as Leeds. But in the end, I mean, I suppose if it's on penalties, it's a lottery, and some excellent penalties. I mean,
Yeah,
I was really impressed by the quality of the penalty, and I suppose me and Solly Marsh, poor Solly Marsh, great player, good player, but quality penalties. I was really impressed. I mean, I thought David De Gea, it. You could have had 100 penalties. He
he's
would have
not
never
so
have touched the ball.
no, no, no.
He was. I don't know what he was looking at, but he certainly wasn't going to save anything. But fair play to Man United, but commiserations to Brighton.
Yeah.
Badge must have had his heart in his mouth when Sabitzer and I think it was Sanchez who got a hand. I think it
Oh,
was to the Sabitzer penalty that
oh
looked like
God.
he'd, and that would have sent Brighton through. Just very quickly, just to summarise, I think on the David De Gea point, Badge, you make some good points, and I think it would be interesting to see if United simply just rip off the band-aid, so to speak, and look to get that next goalkeeper. And it's not easy to find, obviously, quality goalkeepers, one that you want to be your kind of number one. Goalkeeping is a position whereas all the other athletic positions, whether it's defense, midfield, strike, you're thinking if we can get 3, maybe 4 good years out of this player, we've done well. Goalkeeper is the one position where you're really looking to solidify it for maybe
Yeah.
5, 6, 7 years, if not longer. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about it. The rumors are still about that contract potentially being signed, but to your point, I think Sevilla game perhaps highlighted his shortcomings even more than previously. I guess it just depends whether they've got somebody on the market that they feel can take that position and deliver the goods right from the start from next season, because it's a big year for United next year.
100%. And before we move on, I've got to give a shout out. Moses Caicedo, unbelievable. That was a superb performance, and it caps off. I don't know how many great performances he's had this season. That guy's going to the very top, and I'm sure there's going to be a host of clubs in for him this summer. Maybe Arsenal will revisit that as well. I'd love him at United, if I'm being honest with you. He's got everything. He ticks all the boxes. But yeah, I just don't.
Yeah, and I think to Ayub's point about his admiration for Brighton, Tony Bloom, similar reputation in a sense to Daniel Levy, where he stands firm. He's quite direct in terms of the way he deals. I mean, Arsenal put multiple bids in, and he stood firm as is his right to do so. So I do think. I mean, he signed a new contract, but I do think in the summer there'll be a few suitors in for him. And you're right, he had a brilliant game. And I think he was awarded man of the match as well.
Yeah, Brighton did well to land him in the first place. There were big clubs in for him at the time, but they landed him, and fair play to them. That speaks volumes about their recruitment. Moving on and switching gears to Newcastle Spurs. Now, it might seem a little hypocritical for me to take the mick, but my God, what did I see? What did I see in that game? 20 minutes in, 5 down. And don't get me wrong, I know we got a whoop into a certain team early in the season with a dreadful second half performance. But this first 20 minutes of the game, the Newcastle players were laughing. Just what is going on at Spurs? Like I couldn't get my head around it. Ayub, as a fan of a club whose ownership is very much under scrutiny, what are your thoughts on how Daniel Levy is? How he's handling this Spurs team and this Spurs squad? It's unbelievable.
I mean, from a game point of view, I presume it was the culmination of everything that's happened this year. I mean, there is something seriously wrong at Tottenham Hotspur's football club. It emanates from Daniel Levy. Most of the Spurs fans that I speak to, it's always Levy. And I've always said about Daniel Levy that he's I mean, it's I think in one of the earlier shows that we did, I've always said he's a businessman, first and foremost. And on occasions, he seems to be only a businessman. From a business point of view, Spurs are a very commercial club. They are, I think, in terms of match day turnovers, they're the highest in England. And I think in the world, I think they're third behind Barca and Real. So certainly from a commercial point of view, you've got to applaud Daniel Levy. He has invested at some stages. He fought tooth and nail to keep Harry Kane at Spurs when really maybe it would have been quite an easy thing to do to sell him because it was what is over 100 million, I think Man City were offering. So there are moments that Daniel Levy should be applauded for, but I think on the whole, the way that he's running this football club, certainly in terms of the football side, it's shocking, it's disgraceful. I was surprised. I mean, I mentioned it briefly yesterday on the show. I thought when Conte went, everybody else associated with Conte would go. So I was surprised that this guy sort of stayed. I'm not surprised that they're booting him out. I mean, after that shambles. But I think it's not his fault. There is something deep-rooted which is wrong with Tottenham Hotspurs at this moment in time. It's absolutely desperate that they, for their sake, they get the next manager right. I'm hoping that this malaise at the club continues until the end of the season. We play them last game of the season, so it could be a game that we need to win to stay up. So fingers crossed that this madness at Spurs stays.
I just don't understand. You sack Conte, but then give his assistant and the rest of his coaching staff the gig. Then when have you ever heard a caretaker manager getting sacked? I'm sorry, I can't recall. Honestly, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And he gets the chop, and they bring in his assistant. What is going on?
And he just doesn't look a manager as well. I mean, you look at him, and you sort of think he's been sleeping on the streets for weeks. He maybe has. Yeah. So it's a shambles. It's a write off a season. I mean, obviously, the Spurs fans that we talk to, they just can't wait for this season to end. Obviously, I think they're waiting for somebody to be appointed to take this club forward again because it is you look at it, everything is set up for it to be a top four club. So let's see what happens.
It's funny when I think about the Spurs situation on Sunday, my mind drifted a little bit to how, I guess, and I don't know if I speak for the both of you, how we all view football now as we kind of advance in age. I think when I was young, I used to just think football was you get the best players, you put them on the pitch, you win the game, and that's all I care about. And then as you grow older, just maybe through work experiences, life experiences, by watching a million games or just following the game, you understand that there's so much more that goes into delivering a result week in, week out. Just the whole structure of the club, the identity, the right managerial appointments, the right signings. You know, just there's so much to it than what perhaps when I was younger, just thinking, yeah, just we've got Ronaldo, you win the game, you've got Romario, whatever it might be. Do you know, just that kind of basic understanding of football. And the reason I mentioned that, that's why where my mind went to on Sunday, is that when you think about Spurs normally, it's quite obvious that it's just been a catalogue of errors. Ever since they kind of got rid of Pochettino in 2019 in December, they've just, every decision thereafter was, and even arguably the decision to sack Pochettino, you could question. Now, I remember at the time when Pochettino was fired, he was 14 points off the top. But remember, he delivered a few third places. One time he finished second place, plus 60 goal difference, a best goal difference that season, finishing 7 points behind Chelsea. So he delivered, he delivered some good, positive, attractive football. He delivered got them to the Champions League final. And I understand.
No trophies in 5 years for a club of Spurs standing. I mean, I remember, I think we did have conversations around the time. Pochettino should have at least won 1 or 2 trophies in his tenure. For me, he was rightfully sacked.
So, and before you continue with, can we not forget that he finished third in a 2-horse race that he was involved in? for the Premier League title.
I mean, look,
there is that as well.
But just to be consistent, right? I mean, Arsenal picked them at the end in the season that Leicester won the title. But look, Tottenham did challenge them till not the very end, but challenged them to very close until I think they lost at Stamford Bridge to Chelsea, which delivered Leicester the title that year. Look, I mean, Badge is always warning me about time management at Juve, so I don't really want to get into the whole debate around trophies and what have you. I mean, like I said,
Yeah, let's not harken back to 2012.
yeah, let's not harken back. I mean, are you suggesting that, well, he didn't win a trophy, so he's right to be sacked, whereas I can point out 100 managers who've won trophies and been sacked straight away. So look, let's not get into all of that. I mean, but the point is, the reason I mention it is you get Tottenham Hotspur to a European Cup final, Champions League final, you lose against Liverpool. Fine, Liverpool were unbelievable that season. And to fire him literally 5 months afterwards already got me thinking. Now, listen, some of the football that season, the first 15, 20 games, however long it was, about 15 games, some of the football had kind of tailored off a little bit, and it felt like perhaps the end of a cycle. So I'm not arguing that it was the wrong decision to fire him, but it told me a lot that a club can have arguably their most successful manager in decades, and yet at the first sign of a little bit of trouble, they fire him. That was their first recourse. So already my alarm bells were ringing. They then bring in obviously Jose Mourinho into the role a year after he'd obviously ended in quite acrimonious fashion at Old Trafford at Manchester United. Already there was talk that, right, this idea that he's a winner, but he's going to deliver trophies because he's always won everywhere that he's gone. Now, so that already had me thinking, is this the right appointment? There was a lot of talk that Mourinho, again, has he quote unquote lost it or whatever that is? I mean, second season, they then fire him days before an EFL Cup final. And you're thinking, this doesn't make sense to me. It's like you said, Badge, at the start of this segment. It doesn't compute. How do you fire a manager, regardless of personal differences or whatever it may be, but days before a cup final against Chelsea, against Man City, I think it was, Laporta, I think, scoring the winner. But how do you do that? How's that going to impact the squad in readiness for the biggest game of their season? And I think there was some part of me that felt it was incredibly selfish of Levy without understanding what the situation or what the personal situation was and what have you. But it was as if though he did not want Mourinho to win a trophy at Spurs to be able to then, because he knew the fans would then say, look, okay, we're not necessarily playing the best football, and
they rally behind him.
But they'd rally behind him, and that always again gets me thinking about how this club's making reactionary steps. You just mentioned about Stellini being sacked after 4 games in charge. It's reactionary, and then he's going to Ryan Mason, who pretty much the fans wanted all along. It's all reactionary. There's no foresight. There's no planning. There's no preparation. You mentioned yesterday on the episode, he wanted Leeds to invest that season after that first season back when they finished on the top half of the table. You want your club to be proactive at every step that they've taken in terms of after Mourinho. So they then fire Mourinho there after the next season. Let's not forget, they then hired Nuno, who was 5th choice at the time. They wanted Conte, Pochettino, Paulo Fonseca, Gennaro Gattuso. That's just to name 4 people that they wanted prior to Nuno. So he never got the buy-in from the players. He then gets fired 4 to 5 months afterwards. Again, all reactionary, it's not working well. If you remember, I think he was manager of the month in August. He then, obviously, some of the football was atrocious, but you'd think, give a manager time maybe. If he's your man, if you've done your due diligence to suggest he's our man, you've got to give him time. They then fire him. Fabio Paratici, who was already sporting director at the time, brings his guy in, Conte. They wanted Conte anyway. He obviously delivers Champions League football, but he only signed an 18-month deal at the start of his Spurs contract. Nuno had only signed a 2-year contract. Again, how are you empowering these managers when you're giving them short-term deals? I mean, the Conte one was slightly different. I think Conte insisted on an 18-month deal. And that brings me on to the last point, and I do feel quite passionate about this because, again, if I was support of Spurs, this would disappoint me. You had the whole situation with Paratici. You had, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah,
he's not watching.
Well, he's got a lot of time. He's got a lot of time on his hands because he's currently on leave. But you get suspended in January by the Italian FA, and you get a 30-month ban in terms of operating within the Italian Federation. And Spurs at the time, you would think that, okay, we have someone on our books that clearly has been found, I say guilty, but within kind of the footballing federation, what have you, has been found guilty of financial mismanagement during his 11 years at Juventus. Let's not forget, out of the 11 people, and I mentioned this on a previous episode, out of the 11 people that were banned, he got the longest ban. And that tells you a little bit. And what did Spurs do? And you might say, well, I'm not sure if they had the remit to do so, but you would think that's not a really good look, that maybe we just just ask him to listen. We'll just not suspend you, but just put you on the sidelines for a little while. But they did nothing. And then what happens? They fire Antonio Conte. We've covered that at multiple points. Then his ban is extended at the end of March to worldwide, and that was days after Spurs had him on Twitter doing an interview explaining why they had to get rid of Conte. So then Spurs had to put him on leave and put a press release it's all reactionary. Where was the proactivity about the standards that you set at this club saying, no, I'm sorry, we've got somebody who's been banned by the Italian FA of operating within the federation for 30 months. And it just, every last step that they've taken in recent years, it's been 3.5 years since Pochettino was fired. They've had numerous managers in that time. It's all just been an absolute mess. And even after Conte was fired, some may argue, was it a cheap measure to keep some of the staff on? I'm not so sure. You could maybe argue the opposite. I don't want to go all in, but you could make the argument that they were thinking, well, getting rid of the entire staff at this juncture of the season might be difficult to get bodies in terms of all the backroom staff that you need, and just to kind of be balanced in my view. But yeah, and now you fire him because you've had one really horrendous result, and it was a horrendous result. But it's not the kind of club that I want to be supporting. And to go back to my first point about how I now view football, or how we all view football, about how we want our club to be structured and organized and preparing for long-term, not dominance, but long-term being able to compete. Spurs are so far away right now. And it leads me on to just this one final question, which I'd love to hear your thoughts about, is where does that leave Harry Kane? I know it's the most obvious question, but I have to believe that if Manchester United are serious this summer, and I don't think it'll be too difficult. There's a lot of talk saying, oh, it'll be difficult to get him out of Spurs and Daniel Levy won't sell and what have you. I absolutely believe that if Harry Kane, I was going to say kicks up a stink, but I just think if he simply requests to leave, I think this time it will happen. And I think if United are strong enough and have conviction, I think they can make this deal happen.
Well, if he ain't banging on the door to leave, my God, there's something wrong with the brother. Because it's a sinking ship. It really is. And he needs to do all he can. He's wasted enough years there. Don't need to waste any more. So from his point of view, he should be doing all he can to leave, honestly. And I think some Spurs fans wouldn't even mind. I think they just want to rebuild as well. But yeah, I think from his point of view, he has to leave. Has to leave. There's no two ways about it. As far as their managers, I have no sympathy for Spurs. I genuinely don't feel any. I used to like them back in the day. I used to be like, yeah, the Spurs. I like watching them, yada yada yada. But I just don't have sympathy for him. Pochettino thought he's above the Carling Cup. The guy's not won nothing. He's won nothing, and he thought he was above the Carabao Cup, which at the time I think may have been the Carling Cup. Mourinho, he gets you to a final. Forget whatever issues you have with him. If he's got you to a cup final, how do you sack him before the game? So honestly, all these decisions and then what they've done with Conte, they break top managers. They somehow managed to break top managers. I swear to you, Mourinho left Spurs, won a trophy with Roma, won their first trophy in how long? Conte is going to go somewhere else and he's going to win a trophy for his next club. I can assure you of that. It's this club it has it in their DNA. And the way it's run by Levy, you said it perfectly. It's so reactionary.
And the challenge you've got, just because I do want to get your thoughts on Harry Kane. The point you just mentioned, if you're going through managers because you've not identified the right manager, the whole point of identifying a manager is the manager you say, well, we're going to see it out with this manager through thick and thin. And we believe, and that's where the accountability comes in, we believe we've identified the right man, which means we'll have some issues early on, similar to how, let's say, Manchester United, they got the right man in charge. They've taken some lumps this season, away to Brentford, away to Liverpool, and they've taken some absolute thrashings this season. But your eyes tell you that Manchester United are on the up. There's no two ways about it, and that's the point that I don't understand. You're going through managers, and then you've bought these players this season. Richarlison, Christian Romero, who's defending this Sunday and post World Cup, has been absolutely atrocious. A defender that I'd like to get into at some point, because I do not understand his defensive style in any way, shape, or form. He's aggressive, but he's quite selfish, if you ask me, in terms of some of his decision making. But you're buying these players, but then you're also getting through managers incredibly quickly. So then the new manager comes in and says, well, I don't really fancy Richarlison, I don't really fancy Bissouma, or I don't really fancy Romero, whatever that might be. It's just, it's all haphazard. Where's the approach, consistent approach to say, here's the manager, we're going to stick with him for 2-3 years, don't get relegated. It was as though when Pochettino got to 14th that season, they were like, oh, are we going to get relegated? The football's tailed off. And I agree that maybe the football was not great in that first half of the season, but it just tells you a little bit about a club that, again, arguably their best manager in many, many decades, and at the first sign of trouble, they said, well, we'll sack you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just quickly, you've gone Harry Kane. What do you think his next move should be?
He has to. I mean, he should have moved a few years ago. But now is the perfect time, because really, I suppose no Spurs fans are going to begrudge Harry Kane wanting to move now, because the club obviously is going nowhere at this moment in time. He needs to be winning trophies ultimately. I mean, we've obviously chatted again previously about trophies, and if you're one of the best strikers in England, you've got to have some trophies to show. At the end of the day, when he hangs his boots up, he's got to have some trophies. His best chance of winning trophies is either with Man City or Man United, or perhaps another club at the top end of the table, going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you'll see. I think you'll find Chelsea might be in for him as well, just because of the London aspect. But anyways, we've we clearly had a lot to say about Spurs. My God. Moving on to Arsenal and their running. What are Arsenal doing right now, Lewis? Like, what are they doing? They've had 2 games where they've been 2 goals up and blown it. And then you think you've got the perfect reprieve in playing, no disrespect, bottom of the league, Southampton at home. Great warm-up for this Wednesday at the Etihad against City. But they couldn't have started the game worse. And to drop points at home at this stage in the season, like, honestly, what is going on? I believe you said something last Thursday about their chances if they didn't beat Southampton at the Emirates. So I'll let you take it away. I've got thoughts on the matter, but I mean, as an Arsenal fan, it's only right. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, look, first and foremost, I thought Southampton were well worthy of a point. I think that has to be said. I thought they created opportunities. They played on Arsenal's nervousness, and they got themselves a point, and they will be absolutely kicking themselves, because if they had won at the Emirates, they'd be right in amongst it.
Definitely.
And I think you would have probably blocked my number as well, probably as a result. But they were well deserving of a point. I mean, it all starts just in terms of covering the game itself. It all starts off with that first minute. I mean, Arsenal. And this is where it's really interesting, just in terms of the psychology of football, right? It's really interesting to observe. Arsenal concede in the first minute against Bournemouth, well-worked routine. Leeds then visit Emirates after the international break, if I recollect, Ayub, and they try a similar routine, and Christensen, I think, gets a shot away and Ramsdale saves. So it's something that teams, at least when they take the kickoff, let's say, want to kind of target, and fine, it's a good tactic, right? At this time, Ramsdale gets the ball, obviously. It's about 20 seconds gone. And he's got the options to play it left to Gabriel, play it left to Gabriel and play it right to Holding. Just the way Arsenal often structure their attacks. It's always centre-back split, options in the middle, Zinchenko comes in the middle. But we've all played the game. What's really surprising about the muddled mind is that Ramsdale, ordinarily, you'd think first couple of minutes, just play safe and knock it to your centre-backs and go from there. But he tries the more difficult ball, which Alcaraz was obviously, and the other player were kind of slightly closing in on. The gap just simply wasn't there. If you watch it, it's not quite there. The striker's slightly cheating over to that side as well, so he's going to jump it as soon as the pass is made. And look, that tells me a little bit about confused thinking, if that makes sense. And I think that thereafterwards, you really are behind the 8 ball. Thereafterwards, again, I think I mentioned this before, I do think there's a vulnerability at Arsenal at the Emirates. Sometimes even more so than away from home, because they slightly take a few more risks. I think they feel like they have to take a few more risks to beat teams. Odegaard plays the ball into the middle of the park. You cannot go sideways and lose the ball in the middle of the park against, even if the team's 20th in the Premier League, they've got pace. They've got they showed some moments against Manchester City in the game at St Mary's where I thought they've got something. You spoke about it yesterday. A lot of the teams around Leeds are playing with some heart, playing with some quality, and Southampton still have that. And I feel like, again, big game for them. I think home to Bournemouth. So again, you're going 2-0. They then get get a goal back. That's the typical Arsenal goal that you expect. Playing through midfield, Odegaard into Saka. Great stuff, good pullback. But then again, set pieces, they started to concede from set pieces in the second half. Odegaard quite often, I mean, I've seen him in defending many set pieces. I saw at Goodison Park, he ended up on Tarkowski. He does not watch the ball. He's simply there just to try and block people off. And I don't think it's the right way to approach it. Holding misses the first header. There was a bit of talk about Zinchenko, but you've seen that so many times where the ball's flicked on and it ends up at the attack at the far post. But Arsenal,
but the problem with that was like this guy's going around doing huddles and doing all this, that, the other. It's like, are you doing it for the cameras? What are you doing it for? Like the players know the assignment, and you can speak to them. You don't need to do these huddles and whatnot, and then be culpable for a goal yourself. I think that's it's just annoying. It was annoying for me. I'm not even an Arsenal fan, so I imagine for Arsenal fans it's unbelievably frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do take that point. I don't have too much of an issue with it because I always think those elements, I think, well, is he doing it to be a bit of a show off or what have you? I see those elements of having, let's say, less bearing on the result and the performance. So I don't focus on those too much.
I don't know, because if you're doing that, it means you're scrambling and you're trying to get everyone else back composed. So it already adds a bit of nervousness and anxiety to the players. I think there's no need for it, really. You know what your job is.
Yeah, and it's not something you see ordinarily, is it? So I do take that.
Yeah, for the cam.
I do take that viewpoint. I do take that viewpoint. But look, in the end, second half they didn't show much, right? Southampton made a quite defensive change, got the additional kind of, I think, the big fella on, and Arsenal really didn't create that much. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of what makes Arsenal, at least in my opinion, in some ways a wonderful team to watch this season, because they do have some vulnerabilities at times, or at least recently, but yet they have these moments, and you saw it against United at the Emirates. You've seen it in other big games as well. But all of a sudden they find something. Odegaard, brilliant curl finish. They're then scrambling, fighting. Saka gets a rebound, bang in, and a lot of people text me at the time thinking 2 more minutes of this, and you'll probably get the winner. And not arguably, but it would have been the best moment of this season, I think, if they'd managed to turn that around, just in terms of the pandemonium that would have ensued. I think the whole kind of stadium would have probably started running onto the pitch, what have you. So that would have been great scenes. But look, they didn't deserve more than a point, and I think you're not going to get many points when you score a couple of goals in injury time or close to injury time. So I thought a draw was the fair result. I think just in terms of the overall, where that leaves them, it's really funny, isn't it, about momentum? I often think about momentum. What is it? It's this intangible element in football that you can't quite put your finger on. I think back to the World Cup final in Qatar, Argentina dominant for 70, 75 minutes. All of a sudden, France somehow come on strong. Mbappe is doing Mbappe type things, and before you know it, you think extra time, surely France are going to take it. You're playing the biggest game that a footballer can ever play if you're in the Argentina side, and you're thinking, we had this game. They were dominant for the first 70 odd minutes, and yet all of a sudden the momentum changed. But then Argentina arrest it again in extra time, score the goal, and win on penalties. I think back to games like when Manchester United ended Arsenal's unbeaten run. I never forget it. In, was it 2005, the famous game where
Van Nistelrooy, my boy.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Rooney dived over Sol Campbell. So, I mean, anyway, we can get into that at some other point. But the reason I mention it is because you think, oh, you've ended Arsenal's unbeaten run. Many people forget United visited Portsmouth the week after and lost 2-0. Portsmouth were fighting relegation all season. So my point is, momentum's this weird thing. We can make arguments for there is momentum, but then you can have a change of momentum so quickly as well. But Arsenal clearly have lost that. And it feels like what the events of Anfield have then had a knock-on effect to the events at the West Ham game. And then clearly there's been a lack of confidence going into the Southampton game. And I'll just end on this in terms of my first, just kind of, because I would like to kick it around to you guys. There's been a little bit of talk by Gary Neville and others suggesting, using the word, the B word, that they've bottled it.
I mean, it is bottling. It's bottling of the highest order, to be honest.
No, that's fine, and we're all entitled to our opinions, but just bear with me. I think what I would say about that is it's not a term that I like to use, whether you say bottling or whether you say choking. I don't want to turn this into a cricket podcast, but you'll remember the 1999 World Cup semi-final, South Africa, Lance Klusen and Alan Donald. I remember that word being bandied around. So I just remember I was 13, but I do remember that game, and I just remember that incident. It's forever stuck with me because there was a lot of talk about Cruisen and Donald, kind of choking, South Africa choking because it would have been their first World Cup final. They obviously lost to Australia with the run out. The only thing I would say is, I don't know if you guys follow Jocko Willink. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. He's a famous author and podcaster. And he talks about, and you'll have to bear with me because I need a bit of space for this. But my mind went to this. You've got.
This is what he's been building up to, Baz.
No.
We started this podcast.
No.
About 7 or 8 podcasts ago. This is what he's been building up to.
Well,
the floor's yours.
No. Just on this point, and I will finish. This idea of bottling, and he talks about, and my mind went to it straight away because I knew this narrative was building. And he speaks about, so ex-Navy SEAL, he's a famous author and podcaster in America. Many people watched him. He's got a huge following, right? It's Jocko Willink, and he talks about how he talks about when you encounter a confrontation, a physical confrontation in the street or whatever it may be, and he talks about, well, he's asked what's the first thing you should do as an act of self-defense. Yeah, what's the first thing you do? And he says, run away. That's what you do. You run away because if somebody tries to punch you, you can run away. You use your feet. If someone tries to kick you, you run away. If someone pushes you, you try and run away. And he talks about how where the only time that changes, so that's your first act of self-defense. He says the only time that changes is when someone grabs you. And he talks about how if you're trained in mixed martial arts and if you're trained at the highest level in combat, if somebody grabs you, you don't need to overcome any mental hurdle to be able to deal with that situation. You can then go through your grappling, your wrestling, your jiu-jitsu, whatever it might be, to then overcome that situation, get back on your feet, and then run away. Because it's always about running away, because nothing good happens, or a lot of bad things can happen in combat. But what he talks about, how if you get grabbed and you're a human being that's not been grabbed before, and I'll ask you two the question. I imagine you two haven't been physically grabbed in, and be careful of you, but you've not been physically grabbed in a violent altercation. And he talks about how for a normal human being, that's a big mental hurdle to overcome. And the way a normal human being would react to being grabbed in the street would be very much different to how an experienced mixed martial arts expert or somebody who's well versed in the arts would react. And I say all that simply, I'm sorry I took so long, but I say all that to say that's what I see with this Arsenal team. It's not to say, of course, they're professional footballers, but they find themselves in a position or in a situation that they've not been in before. So similar to us, let's say on a driving test or our first day at work or whatever it might be, we're not used to the environment, the pressures or whatever that comes off it. And I think that's what you see. You're seeing a team, and even perhaps even a coach, that's perhaps not reacting in the way that you would expect of a team perhaps that has been there before and has experienced that. Now, I would call that just normal development, normal learnings, normal growth opportunities. So the whole point of this kind of bottling and choking, I can't compute it, because we're so quick to make that transition from Arsenal look great to Arsenal bottled it. I'm thinking, where's this kind of middle area in between? But anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm sure we'll get onto the game, but I am quite keen to hear where you stand with this.
I mean, on the point of psychology, it is something that I think with sport, obviously psychology is extremely important, and it's getting more and more important. There are sports psychologists now that teams employ for a reason, because high-level sport, high-quality sport, there's a pressure on those athletes that perhaps you obviously would never get in normal life. But this is what I can't understand. Now, Arsenal have not been in that position, so therefore you can sort of make the argument that, look, this is something new, so therefore they're experiencing new pressures. But I expect the amount of money that's in football, that they would have sports psychologists, they'd have people sort of working on these individuals. I mean, it ultimately it's the responsibility of the coach, it's the responsibility of the club to ensure that these players are best equipped, not just physically but mentally. I mean, I say this because it's a thing that I always have an issue with Leeds United. I know we're talking about the Arsenal, but in a sense, it's different ends of the spectrum. You've got one where obviously you're going for a title, the other which is trying to stay in the league. The effects, to a certain extent, are pretty similar, because in a sense there's a certain freeze. Key moments. You're not able to exhibit your skills the way that you would normally do. Now, with Arsenal, the first 2 games, I mean, before Southampton, they played quite well for large portions of the game. I think the problem was when they took the lead, because of the time of the season, I think they've almost said, right, let's try and hold on. I think that's where they made the mistake, and that's where really I think Arteta should have earned his coin. He should have then said, no, make it 3-0. If you're 2-0, make it 3-0, make it 4-0. Keep going, keep going. I think either whether it was Arteta, whether it was the players, whether it was a combination of both, I think those are the two games for me that were pivotal in affecting their season. I think the Southampton game was a bit of a freak result, to be honest. Really, I didn't expect Southampton to score 3 goals, but I think those first 2 games were quite instrumental in. I think their mindset just shifted. I think when they got the lead, they just sort of said, right, let's just try and hold the lead. Big mistake.
Just wanted to just comment just on that point. I think some of that can be shaped by, in the end, what we saw. And I apologize, just had to get in, otherwise I'll forget my train of thought. But you talk about the idea of you winning 2-0, go for the third, go for the fourth. I remember when Brendan Rodgers was going for the Liverpool, kind of going for Premier League glory with Liverpool, and they were winning, was it 3-0 at Selhurst Park, I think it was. And the idea was that, hey, we could start making some real inroads into the goal difference, and they then obviously got pegged back to 3-3. I remember similarly when they played Chelsea, the famous game when Steven Gerrard slips and Demba Ba scores. There was a lot of talk about, hey, Liverpool should have just played to get a draw. And obviously Jose Mourinho that day, I think, was manager of Chelsea, and they played spoiler, Torres scoring the second on the break. There was a lot of talk going into that game that Steven Gerrard even mentioned it. And it's one of the things I'm quite disappointed about Steven Gerrard, when he talks about how maybe perhaps we could have gone into that game because a draw would have been sufficient. So there's talk about putting the handbrake on, when if you look at the results Liverpool had going into that Chelsea game, they'd won like 8-9 on the bounce. So why would you then start to put the handbrake on? So what I'm saying is it can work both ways depending on what the result is. Because Chelsea were not 1-2-0 at Anfield or whatever the score was, it's like, oh, we should have just played for the draw. Similar against Palace, it's like you're trying to go for more goals and then you get pegged back 3-3. It's just a lot depends in the end on the end result. That's all I would say.
If you're winning, I mean, sorry, Badge, I'll just quickly add one point to this. If you're at the bottom, it's different. I think you've got to have different strategies. Sometimes you've got to park the bus. But in terms of the Arsenal, up until those last 2 games, or the game, Liverpool and the West Ham game, they were playing superb football. They were on the front foot for virtually 90 minutes. Suddenly, once they can see the finishing line, they started changing slightly their modus operandi, and I think that's where the problem was. It certainly from my perspective. Bash?
Honey, what are these two smoking? What? What am I hearing? You're an Arsenal fan. Like, why was that so measured? Your team has dropped a 2-0 lead on 2 occasions and dropped points. Then they have Southampton at home, bottom of the league. I know I keep saying no disrespect to them, but I mean, they bottom of the damn league. You're at home. You're going into the biggest game of the season, the following game. That is the perfect time to have a statement performance and get a proper result. And what do? They down within, I don't know how many seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds? Doesn't really matter because they go down within the first minute, which is utterly abysmal. Worst start, worst case scenario. And then they just go on to just keep conceding, and you're dropping points. You're dropping points in a run-in in which you're playing teams that you have to be beating. You have to be beating. You've got, who was it? Was the first one Palace? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Liverpool.
Yeah. Besides from Liverpool. It was Liverpool, West Ham.
West Ham, yeah.
Yeah. So you got Liverpool, atrocious season they're having. Playing them off the park, but it doesn't matter if you play them off the park for a half or half an hour, however long it was. You're the top dogs in the league. You had an 8-point lead. You have got to see games like that out. You have to, especially if you take a 2-goal lead. I think that's crazy. Same again, West Ham. Towards the bottom end of the table. I don't even think West Ham had picked up before that result, actually. They were how
But what was the reason though, Bash? I mean, that's obviously what we were discussing.
It's a mentality, isn't it? It's attitude. It's like It's either one or two things. It's either one or two things. They've gotten nervous, or they
What, being
thought
2-0 up? Remember, they were flying, cruising at 2-0 up.
exactly.
And
So
they've
it
got
ain't that.
nerves.
So it isn't that.
Yeah.
It's more so they think they've done it. They think they've got the points in the bag. They've already beaten these teams. They check out.
Which
You
is,
can't check out. It's a
that's the
90-minute
thing, you
game.
see, because that's where it was. I never thought it was bottling it. I never thought it was choking. I thought it was just, it was
No, but it is.
strategy.
No,
The
no, but
strategy was
it
wrong.
is bottling though. It is bottling
No,
because
but
if you get to a point, and I'm not just saying this because it's Arsenal. Trust me, City's first ever league title came after Man United, we had an 8-point lead on them.
6 games to go.
6 games to go, we had an 8-point lead on them,
But
we royally bottled that. So I'm not
Yeah,
just saying
that's
it 'cause I'm
bottling.
hating on
If
it.
you want to see
No, but it's
bottling,
true. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
but just to be very clear in that instance, yeah, United win the season the year. No, actually, I might be. No,
Yeah,
it was
so
the
I
season
know
after
you're
that
going
they
to
won.
use the point that they've
No,
been there.
no, absolutely not. I mean, well, exactly. This is the point I'm making.
No, but it doesn't matter.
Manchester,
It doesn't matter.
Manchester United were 8 points clear with 60 games to go, right? And yes, they lose to Manchester City, they lose away to Wigan, and they draw
The
at
damning
home.
draw at Everton. That was a
Everton
big one.
4-4. I remember the game Sunday afternoon. Steven Pienaar scores. I still remember it. I mean, the reason why it's okay. This is a personal thing. I cannot put that type of. I have too much respect for sporting athletes at the highest level, and even that season, I did not see United as having what I put it down to. What I put it down to is the pressure that perhaps another team, and that's why I want to give Manchester City credit because they've just been winning games. Game after game after game, and that psychological toll over time has told on Arsenal. And look, many people were asking me throughout the season, "What do you think about Arsenal's hopes? They're looking really good. What do you think about Arsenal's hopes?" And I said the same thing time and time again. Not, "Oh, we'll see. I don't see us doing it." No. What I said from an objective viewpoint, if I can be, was I want to be able to see if my club can withstand the pressure. And the reason I mentioned that Portsmouth game was not to have a go at United. Absolutely not. It's to mention that regardless of whether you play an Arsenal in a huge game in a Sunday afternoon and you end their unbeaten run, or you go away to Fratton Park and play Portsmouth, every single game in the Premier League, whether you're playing away at Anfield, away at West Ham, home to Southampton, you have to earn the right to play. You have to earn the right to win the game. And Arsenal,
No. But this is the point. This is the point. You were winning them games comfortably.
But you earn the right to win the game over the course of a 90-minute.
But that's on the players. You got exactly.
No,
it's a 90-minute
sure.
performance.
So
it's a 90-minute performance. If you go 2-0 up and proceed to losing dropping points 2 on the bounce, if you don't think that is the definition of bottling, and then to drop points to Southampton, are you kidding me? That should have been a loss. Forget a draw. Arsenal were lucky to get a point there. If you're doing that when you're 8, you were 8 ahead. You were 8 ahead, and I'm not saying it was a done deal, but my God, man, you're getting games in front of you that you would want at this point in the season. You literally would want these games at this point in the season.
No, I don't disagree that Arsenal have dropped 6 points clearly from, well, I wouldn't say winning positions because they know we're winning against Southampton, but a game that you're right, going into it, you want to win the game.
Arguably the easiest game. Literally, you could have picked.
No, for sure.
Pick a game.
For sure. But that's the amazing thing about psychology in sports, is what I'm saying. It's come off the back of 2 games where they've had moments of, let's say, fragility, if we can say that, and then they've gone into a game clearly slightly, I wouldn't say devoid of confidence, but then the goal in the first minutes robbed them of that confidence, and then it's an uphill battle when it's a game that you have to win. And look, they've rescued a point out of it, which I'd like to come on to as well, because I think that point is significant. I'm not absolving Arsenal of any blame. What I'm saying is they had to show... No. Let me
I know you don't believe in this bottling.
No, please let me finish.
Definition of the word bottling and whatnot, but that exists in sports, whether you like it or not. It exists. In sports.
Yes, but because it's not something you can quantify, it's a subjective assessment. That's what I'm saying.
Subjective.
Watch Leeds.
100%. It's not.
That's bottling.
No, but what is it? What
if you have an 8-point lead and then lose it,
it's on this one. I would sort of say that I don't think Arsenal have bottled it. I think it's more strategies, and in-game strategies as well, which has changed to be playing sublime football, and then suddenly, I think that's the thing. 2-0 lead. Suddenly, there's a different mindset. The last game was a slight anomaly, but it showed tremendous character to come back. So I would not say there's bottle. I think certainly
all this
Arteta.
time, all this time, if Arsenal had a 3-point lead and they were constantly winning to stay just ahead of City, then if they lost or dropped points, I wouldn't call that bottling. It is what it is. You're neck and neck. You've had a considerable lead, and you've had 3 good games where you should be picking up maximum points. If you have aspirations to win the title, you have to be closing them games out. Have to be. Southampton game. You can't even be going behind. How are you going behind against Southampton?
But there's a difference, though, isn't there, between closing games out and bottling? I think.
No, but it is. How can you not call a 2-0 lead
bottling
in
is
2 games in a row? You bottle it.
It's, for me, bottling is where you absolutely freeze. You're unable to perform through the whole game. You can say certain key moments. You can bottle certain key moments, but I think
game's
Arsenal,
90 minutes. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to squander it over 90 minutes. You can squander it over 10 minutes. But you've 100% applies. And as an Arsenal fan, I thought I would be unbelievably aggrieved if this was my club and we were 8 points ahead.
The reason why I'm not aggrieved, or the reason why I'm not, because I have this view of football that you have to earn it over the course of 38 games. And we've spoken about this word many times. There is no entitlement to win the Premier League. You have to earn it over 38 games. And what Arsenal have shown is that if going into the Man City game, if we account for Man City having 2 games in hand, they're a point behind City, right? If you just simply look at it from a level point of view, with few games to go. So if you simply didn't know the journey, you would say, actually, that's pretty decent from Arsenal so far to be just a point behind Man City. That's not where I'm going with this, by the way. What I'm simply saying is I just don't have this. It's not ours to lose, because you have to earn it time and time and time again. And you have to be able to earn it over 90 minutes. And what Arsenal have shown in the last 3 games is that they've not earned that right. Not over the course of 90 minutes.
When you're 2-0 up with a half to go, it's yours to lose. No, if it's 0-0, then it's not yours to lose. It's in your hands then. You've got a 2-goal advantage on the on the opponents.
Of course, but let me ask
you. If you're spilling it from there.
But if I want to make it a basic assessment, if one team's allowed to score 2 goals in the first half, why is the other team not allowed to score 2 goals in the second half?
Then that's fine. But the difference being is if you're trying to score 2 in the second half, you're down by 2. So mentally it's a huge thing, and you're already at a deficit. I don't understand how you guys don't see as like this is genuinely, in sporting terms, a very definition of bottling.
But if it is, let's run with that thought. Why do you think they're bottling it?
I'm telling you, there's this mental fragility with them. They're thinking especially in the Liverpool game, and then even the West Ham game, they've thought this game was wrapped. They thought it was a wrap.
And how do you get
above it?
And how do you get rid of that mental fragility?
That's got to be instilled. That's got to be instilled by the coach, by players on the pitch themselves. Listen, they're not robots.
But that's my point.
You don't need programming. You should be able to have it in here.
For sure. But in terms of this idea, failure is also part of success, right? Manchester United.
Listen.
Manchester United.
Ain't the time.
No.
To be philosophical and all this nonsense. If my 11 players are doing this and have done it 3 games on the bounce when we've had a massive lead, going into the biggest game of the season, playing your ultimate rivals, basically, for the title. How are you going to drop those?
What I would say is that there are some.
I don't subscribe to that notion.
Yes, true, fine, but there are some mitigating circumstances as well in those games. And what I would say is, look, it's not about one player, right? But you're missing a player who started every Premier League game prior to that, and he obviously, before he got obviously injured against Sporting Lisbon. No, what I'm simply suggesting is, it'd be interesting to understand what Arteta's thoughts are. And I don't blame him for this, by the way, but he's obviously put Holding in instead of Saliba. He had to, right? Saliba's season's most likely at an end. And I think that's really that's hurt them. Yeah, I think we'd all agree with that. He has been one of the best defenders in the league this season, one of the best. But it's really interesting from an Arteta perspective. He's obviously put Holding in, and he's not changed anything else. And I always really want to do a deep dive on what the manager's thinking. Clearly, he wants to empower Holding and give him the confidence to say, we trust you. We're not going to change anything else. We're simply going to slot you in at centre-back next to Gabriel. But I wonder whether he had his time again, especially at certain moments, perhaps at Anfield, at West Ham, especially even against Southampton, because there was a lot of nervousness in the air, whether he would have thought, what I'm just going to do is perhaps sacrifice Vieira in the Southampton game, because Xhaka had obviously had a poor game at Anfield and then missed the Southampton game, and maybe just play Jorginho to slightly just strengthen that middle, play him alongside Partey. That would have meant a change of style and structure. It's an acceptance that we're not quite where we need to be, but it also sends perhaps a message or a negative message to the defender that you've brought in that say, we don't quite trust you, so we're just going to give you a little bit more reinforcements. Now, I don't mind where you sit on that assessment. Yeah, I'm just saying it'd be interesting for me to understand the thought process when it comes to Arteta. And maybe if he had his time again, would he approach it slightly differently? But look, we could probably talk about this for a long time. And I know you're keen on time
I do
management.
not subscribe to this notion. Oh yeah, give him a pat on the back. Oh, it's all right, lads. Don't worry about it. You've not been here before.
I didn't
None of
suggest.
that. If you're going for a league title and you've got a massive lead going, and especially you're going into the City game, it's unbelievable.
But
I actually can't. It doesn't compute.
But my point is,
have such a pathetic performance like that. My God.
Let's get our thoughts on the game quickly. But my point,
yeah, sorry.
My point is,
right. Let's move on.
No. Let me finish quickly. Let me finish quickly because it is the biggest game of the season, right? Let me finish quickly. I'm not giving Arsenal a pass.
You are.
If anything, I'm doing the exact opposite because
you gave us a lovely, well, a long-winded analogy about
self-defense.
No,
my point is, it was never ours to lose. At least I never saw it like that. I don't believe we have this divine right to the title. You don't.
But if you're 8 points ahead and you have 3 games which you should be looking to get maximum points out of, I'm sorry, but I expect more than bloody 3 points from 2 games in which we've led 2-0, and then Southampton. My God. I hate to interrupt you, mate, but honestly, I can't believe we differ on this opinion.
Good. That's what makes it great.
We are running long here, so I do want to get your thoughts going into the City game, boys. What do you think is going to happen? How do you think it's going to play out? Can Arsenal recover from dropping points to Southampton at home, going into the biggest game of the season?
Are you conscious of time? City. I can't see City.
Why though?
City they've got the mentality, they've got the quality, they've got the ability. After the results that the Arsenal have had, that's just going to give them a boost as well because they know they win the game, they win the league. And I think they've got characters who can cope with that expectation. So City for me.
And before I hand off to you, I truly believe at this point, City are going to wipe them. I honestly think I've got 3-1 down, but I think it'll be a dominant 3-1 from City. I think the Arsenal players have lost. I think they've lost the battle already. Mentally, I think if City score early, especially, I think they will break, and they will break badly. They've shown in previous weeks that they can't handle the situation. They just can't handle being in the big seat, shall we say. And that might sound harsh, but honestly, given the results and the performances, I think I truly think that's the case. I'm expecting City to destroy them a little.
I'm going to wrap this up in a minute, Badge. I promise. Just the point against Southampton was in some ways quite important. Because although it looks incredibly unlikely, that if Arsenal get a point at Etihad Stadium on Wednesday, again, I repeat, looks unlikely. But what it does is it put them 5 points clear of City, with City having 2 games in hand. Now, let's say City win those 2 games in hand because they look like they're beating everybody in their way right now. That would put City 1 point ahead of Arsenal right now, which means if they draw the game at Etihad, and again, it's a huge ask, but if they draw the game at Etihad, what it does mean by getting that 1 point against Southampton, that if on the unlikely chance that Arsenal win out, it means City would not be able to afford another draw. Whereas previously that wasn't the case. If they were 4 points clear right now, they'd lost to Southampton, Man City could have drawn the game tomorrow as well as got a draw somewhere else and still been okay for goal difference. So I think just in the grand scheme of things, I think it is an important point. Though I think it'll come to that, I don't. To the prediction, I do think City will win. They'll win comfortably. And I think it's going to be the type of performance, unfortunately, that we saw when City took apart Liverpool a number of weeks ago. It was 4-1, but it was a game that highlighted perhaps the difference between the teams in terms of one team just being absolutely comfortable in their playing style and dominant from start to finish and just keeping the ball off them. That's one of the worst things, I think, when you're supporting your team, you just can't get the ball. And I worry that it's going to turn out to be that kind of game. I think you're right. I think Arsenal will lose, and I think they will lose heavily, unfortunately.
Yep. A couple of weeks ago, I was excited for this game. Honestly, my excitement's kind of gone. Just off the way Arsenal have been playing and their mental fortitude that they've displayed. Doesn't excite me as much anymore, unfortunately, and I'm sure I'm in the minority on that, as people will still be buzzing for the game tomorrow. But yeah, there we have it. And that will be all, lads. We have ran a little long, but
Just on a final, just before, I've just looked at the Leeds team. We're down. Honestly, I cannot believe this idiot. I was speaking yesterday about players who are out of form. Their confidence is shot. This idiot is still picking. He's the best player that we have, Willie Gnonto. He's still on the bench. He's still on the bench. Harrison, who can't kick a ball 5 yards to another player, he's playing. McKennie and Rocker, the worst midfield pairing, still playing. Melia, who's making mistake after mistake after mistake in the lineup.
And Firpo back in.
Well, Verber's injured, so I suppose,
okay, fair.
Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I mean,
on the plus side, you have Sinistera, Rodrigo, Bamford all on the pitch at once. Rodrigo and Sinistera being your goal getters.
Badge, I've got a small request. Depending on the result tonight, can we get back live again at 10 p.m?
Oh my goodness!
It's going to be a two-man show. I mean, we've lost. I'm honestly, I'm looking at the side. This is a disgrace. This is an absolute joke. This is an absolute disgrace. Let's wrap up.
Hashtag pray for Leeds.
Yeah, hashtag pray for Leeds. And honestly, let's pray for Leeds, because just for the sake of this podcast, they need to stay in the league, man. So let's hope, eh? Let's hope. And that's coming from a United fan. I can't believe I'm saying those words, but there we have it. But yeah, thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Uwais, Ayub, appreciate your time. Remember, guys, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit the bell for a notification for our next video. And please, I implore you to leave a comment down below on what you thought about Uwais's analogy.
It's all about the self-defense.
They've got to understand it first before they put a comment.
And you name drop this Navy SEAL like he's Tom Cruise.
Jocko Willink is quite famous.
Yeah, Novak Djokovic. Yeah, thanks.
Amongst his family.
Yeah, amongst his family. But yeah, thank you once again for joining us, guys. We will catch up with you later in the week. And I'm sure you would have calmed down by then, given Leeds is likely lost tonight. Hey, I might have just given you the that might be a good thing what I just said. But yeah, thank you for joining us, guys. This has been Just Onside. And in the meantime, I nearly botched that. Good Lord. How do I usually wrap this up? Oh, yeah. That's been this episode of Just Onside. And until the next one.